anything passed, given that the trust law is probably going to come out full force. So how can we, I know you have a supermajority, but are there other things that we as citizens can do?
So I think the past efforts to pass diesel bills have failed because part of them have been federally preempted. They've, Michael Dembrow, our senator just over there, had been trying to regulate both off-road and on-road vehicles. And regulating off-road vehicles at this point, we're going to need a federal waiver from the Trump administration to do that. So I looked at the bill and I was like, not going to happen. So let's do the piece that's going to be hard, that we don't need federal permission to do, which is regulating on-road right now. The $55 million that we have left from the VW settlement fund is basically a carrot to the myriad of different industries that have on-road vehicles. That'll help the transition, but Representative Nosse and I have signed up for, in the bill, a task force in the interim to figure out how we fund this robustly over time so we can get at both on-road and off-road, hopefully when we have a better federal partner in doing that work in 2 years. So this is not going to be an easy bill.
What country are you talking about?
2 years
This
from now,
bill's not going to be
we're
easy
gonna get a
right
different
now,
president.
but we're teeing up the bigger fight to do collectively the whole system when we're able to do so with a federal waiver.
So what can we do?
Just keep on reminding us that this is going to be a take-home bill for our communities. We got to get it done. Thank you.
And my job has been increasingly difficult to do things on a federal level right now, as far as travel bans go and our relations with different countries, because I can't access donor banks anymore. So I have Oregonians that need transplants, and I'm going into patient rooms and saying, I'm really sorry, but I can't find anyone for you. And that's been hard, so I decided to write a bill. And I got a sponsor, and it's in committee, and I'm just trying to get the word out about it so that it doesn't die in committee.
What's the bill?
It is Senate Bill 748. And what Senate Bill 748 would do is bring educational materials on bone marrow transplant to every DMV in the state. Because we do that with solid organs, and Oregon leads the nation in the number of registered donors. So I thought, well, we can totally do that with bone marrow. And bonus, you don't have to be deceased to be a bone marrow donor. And I think that having this information available will kind of take away a lot of preconceived notions. Because guess what? You can just use peripheral blood now, and you can save somebody's life.
Thank
So
you.
I think we're up to it.
That sounds like a bill to pass.
Hi, Bill Barber, Sunset. I'd like to thank Representatives Power and Nosse for sponsoring the Equal Access to Roads Act. And I'd like to ask Senator Taylor for her support for that act.
Yeah.
Is this lane sharing?
No, it's not.
Eliminating the residency requirement for driver's license.
Oh.
Oh, the driver's license card?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that's, yes, when I was
It's
in the
probably, it
house.
started in the House, and so when a bill starts in our chamber, if you didn't organize yourself well enough to get over to the Senate side, you can't sign on to the other chamber's bills until the bill shows up in your chamber. We're very confident that our senator will also sign it.
Yes, don't worry, yes, I do support that bill, and it is an important clarification, because that does come up time and time again, folks, that if a bill starts in one chamber, that's how we have balance of democracy, right? Starts in one, and there's a short period of time where we can sign on to each other's bills in each other's chambers, but once it gets filed, then it cannot until it leaves one chamber, then I can sign on, and it happens vice versa. It's just the way, but yes, I do
The
support
House is
it.
going to pass
In the
that.
House, when I was in the House, I supported it as well.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much.
But, I think it's timely. It's, ending daylight savings time or permanently switching to daylight savings time. And, wondered how you would all vote on that issue.
Gosh.
So, it's funny, because I have, someone's coming. It's tomorrow, right? I'm interested in hearing more about it. I think I have someone on my calendar this week who's coming to talk to me about it, to understand it. I know that there is some literature in my office that I haven't reviewed yet about the pros and cons.
And then there's the paralyzing role of big money in Oregon's politics, and it affects both parties. The recent series in the Oregonian has pointed out in detail. Would you support referring a constitutional amendment to the voters that would remove the limitation, the prohibition against campaign limitations contributions and expenditures?
Yes, easily, yes, I'm a solid yes on that. Of course, everyone knows about the U.S. Supreme Court decision, so we can pass some limits, we can do some things here, but there are restrictions due to the U.S. Supreme Court, what we'll do, but yes, I do support limits. And in the Senate, for the first time, at least that I'm aware of, we are having a campaign finance reform committee looking at some of these issues in more detail.
In the House, we don't have a campaign finance committee. We would send a bill like that to the Rules Committee, which I'm a member of, and I would be a yes on that bill.
And also Portland Neighbors for Diesel Action. And I want to commend you guys for your diesel bill that you're proposing. It's a good one. We have a question. Our group, our Coalition of Neighborhoods group has a question. The 10-member task force to study and make recommendations on funding and other matters. Would it be possible to ensure that one of the 10 members is a specialist in public health issues related to diesel emissions, not just an organizational representative? Should that task force have the strongest and most credible public health expertise available?
Great suggestion, thank you. Rob, and I'm sorry, Representative Nosse and I were literally putting together the task force quickly.
Last one.
So we started with, the folks who worked previously on it. I think public health is a great lens to bring to it. Thank you.
That'd be an easy amendment to pass.
Hold that while I write it down.
Hi, I'm someone from the Creston neighborhood who's also a public schools teacher, and I kind of want to piggyback on the issues of revenue that have happened over the years and how it's come up short. And my question isn't so much what we can do, it's what are you guys going to do to make sure this is not another one of those times where, oh, well, we kind of had this proposal, but here's a couple $100 million, and that should somehow solve your school's problems. I've heard one of you at least supports $4 billion, is what I think most of us think this is the beginning of needed. I haven't seen anything like that in the revenue proposal. I've heard Senator Taylor's office staff told me she supports $4 billion. And
$4 billion.
I'm happy to hear that. But yeah, no, I understand that. But $2 billion was all that, for biennium, was all that was talked about in the presentation. And what are we going to do to make sure it's like, well, here's a weak version of what you asked for?
So, here's what you have to remember, okay? It's a whole state, okay? And we have to have a supermajority in both chambers to pass it. And our leadership, the governor, the Senate president, and our speaker are very united around doing this. And we are probably on the fringes of our caucus in terms of us being the most willing to pass the largest tax increases possible, as many taxes as we can stand to raise, okay? But not everybody in the state of Oregon feels the way that the three of us do. And so we feel like this is our best chance to do it this session, and we will be pushing for something as aggressive, i.e. raise as much money as possible. And that's the best we can hope to tell you. And if you think that politicians in swing districts where they actually meet Republicans get punished for voting for tax increases, we're heading into the best headwind politically for us to be able to do that. It's going to be a good year for Democrats to run in 2020. We're going to have a strong somebody to run against this current president if he's not impeached before the time he gets a chance to run again. And so this is our best chance to do it either legislatively or if it gets up on the ballot to be able to pass something to the ballot.
Hi, my name is Paige Kreisman. I'm a legislative advocate with the Democratic Socialists of America Portland chapter. And I'd like to touch back on the revenue situation. And I'd like to ask Senator Taylor directly. You support this $4 billion more for public schools and education, but I'm concerned about where this comes from. So earlier when we did the presentation, you mentioned different tax solutions for that. You mentioned like a cigarette tax, and a lot of just regressive taxes, but we dismiss taxing the wealthy and taxing corporations as something that's not possible. You dismissed as 15%, something that's out of hand. And I'd like to ask you directly, how can you justify coming in here and saying that you're working for us and solutions that work for us, and at the same time take corporate campaign contributions? Just in the last 6 months, you've taken contributions in the multiple thousands of dollars from AT&T, from the Oregon Business and Industry PAC, to multiple contributions from Nike, from Comcast, from Kroger,
We got your question.
and natural gas PAC. So how do you justify that, and at the same time ignoring the corporate tax needs on schools?
Oh, I no problem, happy, thank you for your question. So I have always, in all of my public speeches and all of the committees that I've served on, in every door I've knocked on, in every single forum, I've been very, very clear and very, very transparent about where I stand on taxes. So there should be no question whatsoever. So, and I'm sorry if somehow there's been some sort of interpretation that you've received otherwise. When we make decisions about where to change the income tax structure in Oregon, I am more than happy and have always voted personally on the ballot before elected and when elected. I will always support, and in committee have always said, I'm happy to tax the upper 1%. What happens is then someone comes and presents information, and we have done that. And I worked for Measure 66 and 67, that's how old I am. I ran, so what I did as a volunteer, before I was elected, I went to all the PTA meetings, and some of you may have been at them. I went as a volunteer and tried to get PTAs, because the PTAs sanctioned that, and the auto shell's right here to verify that I did that. So I went to the PTAs as a volunteer 10 years ago, and went around and asked people like yourselves to go ahead and support 66 and 67. I have a very long, strong track record of how I have worked to raise taxes on the wealthy. So, just so you can be assured. Regarding changing the brackets, I'm very interested in changing the brackets. I find it outrageous that we tax at such a high level the people who make the least amount of money. Unfortunately, when I won the election, I don't have a hair on top of my head. I have 89 other legislators that I have to contend with. So I have always advocated and will continue to support the raising of the brackets, as we call, so that the lower income people are not taxed as much, and I would be happy to raise it at the higher end. The reality is that we have 4 million people in Oregon. We're 1% of the nation's population, 1% of the economy. We have very, very, very few people who make these large sums of money. Happy to tax them. I have what's called the carried interest loophole this session that I'm trying to pass. I'm happy to discuss what the carried interest loophole is and how the very, very wealthy, those people that sit in the 1%, these are hedge fund managers that do reside here, in order to make it so that they are not afforded that luxury. This is something that Hillary Clinton tried to do at the federal level, and when she would become president. Even Donald Trump, I still have it on my kitchen billboard, even Donald Trump thought that the carried interest loophole was outrageous and should be taken away. That's how egregious that tax break is. So I do have a bill, I had it last session, it didn't pass, I have it again this session, I've already testified, and I'm trying to push it through. So please rest assured, I have a very, very long track history, and I'm happy to provide all the detailed information. And in addition, my voting record, both in committee, both in my bill sponsorships and where my name lies, and where I voted. So although I appreciate you standing up and saying that, you can see that I am defending myself, and I am defending myself because I know in my conscience and my soul what I fight for, what I believe in.
Our last question, because these two women have other things they've got to get to, but I can stick around for a little bit, and then we do need to be out of the building by noon. The SCID workforce that's here.
And one, I want to make a comment that there are some taxes that aren't going to raise a lot of revenue, but I think are important for equity, that people see that we do it. So even though they're not going to happen, I would encourage you guys to throw those in that big tax bill.
Okay.
Second, the other point I want to make was, have you considered raising the minimum wage to $15 like Washington has? That would actually increase our income tax revenue and get people out of the lowest bracket where they're paying the 9%.
So, we will look at some of those other tax increases, and whether, even if they don't raise very much money, we may consider some of them. Just remember that we are in the hunt of raising really large sums of revenue for schools and healthcare, and that's going to be our first priority this session before we do anything else, okay? And then in terms of the minimum wage, we did raise the minimum wage. We're doing it gradually. We will eventually get to $14.50 an hour, I believe, in 2 more years here in this city, and then it doesn't quite go to $15 an hour in more suburban districts and more rural districts, but in probably another 2 or 3 years, we get to $14.50 an hour for minimum wage in the metro area.